Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocket Top Insider Press Pass podcast. I'm your host, Jack Foster, as always, joined alongside Rick Butler and Ryan Shumpert, coming at you on a Thursday, November 21st edition, talking a lot of college football playoff rankings, as Tennessee is now the first team out. Of course, looking in on the rankings with only 2 games left to play, so we're going to get into that, just a tad bit of UTEP and some hoops as well, as that season is in full swing. Rick, how you doing this morning?
Doing good. Just another week in the college football season. Obviously, we had the rankings come out on Tuesday. I don't know what you guys think about this, but I was on a podcast yesterday and I was asked if the controversy is good for college football. And I was kind of reminded of that phrase, no publicity is bad publicity. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. Yes, there's a lot of controversy you can talk about. Yes, there's a lot of differing of opinions when it comes to college football. And I'm not necessarily projecting the long term of the sport, but I do think that all of this conversation here for the sport, even if it's, hey, why is this happening or why is that happening? I think it's all good for the sport. And I certainly think it makes it an intriguing time to be covering college football, to be covering Tennessee football, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a wild week. I've certainly had fun with it, but happy to be here with you guys talking about it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It feels like, no matter what, there's going to be disagreement about the field. No matter how big you make it, there's going to be something. I mean, you look at the March Madness tournament and how, bubble teams are decided and there's backlash for that. Of course, football's magnified, but, 12 teams field gets small really quickly. I remember last year it was like, well, Louisville would make it. Are we sure we want to do 12 teams because like Louisville's going to get stomped? Well, now SEC expands and these conferences are expanding. It's starting to cannibalize each other way more than in the past. And this is what happens. Look at all the 2-loss SEC teams we have and how much debate and disagreement there is with this playoff field. But Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, you're right. It's I feel like the conference expansion, and especially with like the SEC not going to a 9-game conference schedule, has really led to more of this because you just have, it feels like in some instances, fewer of these teams playing each other, or fewer of matchups between these top teams than we would have had, or we would have at least in the SEC. Otherwise, obviously Texas, Oklahoma, maybe it's a little bit different for them specifically, which obviously Texas more relevant this year. But it's definitely a very new look. And while I want it to go to a 9-game conference schedule for that very reason, it feels like it would help iron a lot of this stuff out. The way the committee is kind of treating strength of schedule, I don't really think the SEC has any reason to at this point.
Yeah, it's a good call. Clearly, evaluating strength of schedule in their rankings as far as the SEC teams go a little bit, but you can argue elsewhere not as much. Tennessee, first team out, 11th team ranked, though, ahead of BYU and Boise, who are technically in the field, I believe. And, I think this was expected, Brian. We talked about it last week. Tennessee loses to Georgia. It's very likely they fall behind Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss, and that is what happens. Committee's valuing head-to-head with ranking Bama and Ole Miss ahead of Georgia, but then you can make the Tennessee-Alabama argument, and then it just gets messy. You can't value head-to-head for all 4 because you wouldn't be able to. It's impossible. So Tennessee is the odd man out here, and of course losing most previously, but it felt like this was coming if Tennessee was to lose to Georgia.
Yeah, it wasn't surprising. I mean, I guess the question was more like where Tennessee would actually land in the rankings and where that would shake out when it comes to Boise State and when it comes to BYU or SMU and some of those other one-loss teams not in the SEC, not in the Big Ten. But when it came to Notre Dame, when it came to the teams in the Big Ten, when it came to the teams in the SEC, I think we knew Tennessee was good, where Tennessee was going to be, and that the way the playoff works and the way it's formatted, that was going to end up, no matter where Tennessee was ranked, Tennessee was probably going to end up being the first team out of the field at this point.
Yeah, it was just hard to see them falling behind. I don't think, there's anything about this number 11 ranking that should have been surprising. And I will say the good thing that happened for Tennessee, while it's not just super great or not that it mattered all that much, but something that definitely helps Tennessee a little bit is BYU losing. We've talked on this pod before about how we thought the Big 12 was going to be a one big bid league anyway. Well, BYU's loss to Kansas ensures that. Like the small possibility that BYU could still find a way in over a 2-loss Tennessee if BYU is a 12-1 conference championship loser, right? Just losing in the Big 12 title game. Maybe there was a way BYU makes ahead of Tennessee. I don't think that would have been the case, but definitely a small chance. That is now extinguished. BYU and the rest of the Big 12 have to win its league to make the college football playoff. So that at least helped Tennessee out a little bit. It eliminated one scenario, but of course there are multiple scenarios with how Tennessee, could get left out. And there's a lot of things that, you need to be rooting for in the back of your mind. But it feels to me, Ryan, that only one need to hit. And there's a couple I want to get into here. And the most likely to me for Tennessee to make the college football playoff is for Indiana to get absolutely blown out by Ohio State this weekend, and for Tennessee to leap IU and a 10-2 Vols team make it in over an 11-1 Hoosiers team. That feels the most likely to me, and I think that's all that really needs to happen. They only need to jump one team, as long as Texas can beat Texas A&M. And that would be Indiana getting blown out by Ohio State.
Yeah, no. Well, yes and no. Yeah, I think you 100% nailed, and you've been on top of this for a while. You nailed it on the head with the Texas A&M game as being like the one thing that could really throw things off, because right now it's like, yes, they need one thing to go their way, but there's the caveat of like, but Texas still needs to beat A&M. They need one thing to go their way, but they need that result to hold it. And even then, I'm not like positive Texas would get in at 10-2 over Tennessee. I
Right.
think this week really is when you're starting to see some backlash on Texas's schedule that, you, Jack, really have, and but also on this pod have been on top of for the last couple of weeks, that they're really in a very similar spot where if they lose to A&M, they're not going to have any good wins at 10-2. But yes, from the standpoint of Notre Dame loses one game, that should be good enough for Tennessee to get in. If Ole Miss loses one game, would think it would be this, if they lose a game this Saturday to Florida, which I think of any singular game, I think that one's the most likely to go Tennessee's way with Florida winning. That should be good enough to get in. The Indiana one, I don't know. I'm less certain on what the committee would do. I just think from the politics aspect of it, I think I think
Big
Ohio
Ten.
State. Yeah, a 4 Big Ten, a 4 SEC. The Big Ten and SEC run the sport. I think they're not going to want to shake up the boat too much by putting a 2-loss SEC team in over a 1-loss Big Ten team. I think it's got to be like a real beatdown, like 21 points, 24, 28 points, I think is what it's going to have to be for Indiana or for Tennessee to get in over Indiana.
I actually agree with Ryan as well. This was something that somebody asked me yesterday, and they used a 14-point margin. And I kind of laughed at that because I said, well, yeah, you're kind of teetering on the edge of that being a blowout versus it being a 2-score loss. And I do think that you got to look at the committee. It was funny. I was looking on Twitter yesterday. I saw somebody post a picture of the Tennessee branded cup. I think you guys know what I'm talking about there. I think the listeners do as well. Just kind of putting the protective cup on. I wonder if that's needed for a situation like the committee looks at that loss against Ohio State and they say, well, Ohio State is our number 2 ranked team in the country, right? We believe that that's still a good loss. Jack, you mentioned the caveat of potentially being a 21, 28-point loss. I think you guys are right. I think maybe that drives a little bit more conversation about what could be. But I still think I just wouldn't be surprised at all if the committee looks at that loss and says, well, it's Ohio State, right? We've looked at Ohio State as one of the best teams in the country all year. That's a fair loss. And I think they still respect the fact that Indiana has been able to do what they've done to this point in the season. Even though it hasn't been against good teams, I think the committee likes that consistency out of them. So I agree. I think that's one of those ones where I'm still hesitant. Even though I agree, in my mind, it completely makes sense because it's like, hey, if both teams are losing on the season, then look at other metrics. We'll get into that conversation in a second. But I'm hesitant about that Indiana conversation as well. I think that could go a lot of different ways, but Tennessee fans just need to root for an absolute bloody beatdown. I mean, just a disgusting game in Ohio State's favor.
And, you said 21, 28 points. The spread's 14. I don't think 14 would be enough. I don't even think 17 would be enough. It's going to have to be 3 touchdowns or more. And the way Ohio State plays football, I just don't know if it's all that likely.
Too. More offensive line injuries this week.
McLaughlin out. They're struggling up front. it's going to be tough for Indiana or for Ohio State to just boat race them completely. Like, say Notre Dame is going to do to Army this weekend, or Notre Dame did to Navy early in the season. You think about these teams that are kind of like, are they actually good? And then they just get pummeled by a heavyweight. I think Indiana's legit, but like obviously, I don't think they're better than any of these 2-loss SEC teams. I just the way Ohio State plays football, it screams a 17-point win. That's like 28-10 or something. That's just what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be surprised if Ohio State just blows the brakes off of them. One thing I will say, and look, I don't know how the committee would judge this, because Rick, I think the 2-touchdown 17-point win, to me, that's where it becomes like interesting of what you do. Like that's the result where I think the debate. Yeah, exactly. Well, it is. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's where the debate becomes most interesting. Like to me, I'm sure no matter what happens, the Big Ten people will be arguing for Indiana, and the SEC people will be arguing for Tennessee. But look, if Indiana loses by 3 points, I completely get the logic of putting them in. I would understand what the SEC is saying, but it's like at least they were competitive on the road. And I was doing the Locked On pod with Eric Kane yesterday, and we were kind of talking about this exact thing. And he made a good point, and I'm not sure how the committee judges this, but 2-touchdown games can look a whole lot differently. Like Tennessee lost to Georgia by 14 points. Tennessee lost to Georgia by 14 points on Saturday. They lost to Georgia by 14 points 2 years ago in Athens too. And anybody who watched those games know Tennessee was vastly more competitive on Saturday than they were 2 weeks ago. Now 2 years ago, yeah. My hunch is that the committee, that's not really going to matter to the committee, because the committee doesn't really use a whole lot of logic in anything they do.
Doesn't watch the games.
They don't watch the games. Yeah, it doesn't. It certainly doesn't feel that way. But to me, that aspect of it is interesting. At least they can use it to manipulate it however they want.
And that's kind of one of the points that I want to get into today. And I've written about it a couple times this week, and I'm not necessarily telling people anything that's new or anything they haven't heard, but we're sitting here in such a convoluted situation because there's so many different metrics that you could look at. And there's metrics that, let's just talk about the 4-team SEC logjam right there with 2 losses. There's metrics that could point Tennessee's way. There's metrics that are going to point against Tennessee's way. Jack, I was watching the Always College Football podcast with Greg McElroy, which I know you do a great job of producing. You guys had a great graphic up that talked about Tennessee's, combined, the combined record. Help me out here.
It's like the combined record of teams you beat. So take all the teams Tennessee's beat, their records combined.
Yeah, Tennessee's was 29-14. It was the only one with a losing record from those opposing teams in that quartet of teams. And so I understand if the committee's going to value that sort of metric, I can at least understand some of their logic. But Ryan, you had a great tweet right after the reveal show talking about the inconsistency in logic, not just from week to week what the committee's doing, but within 4 spots in the rankings, there's a lot of inconsistency. And I can't remember that exact tweet that you had, but we've written about it on RockyTopInsider.com. So it's one of these things where, I think the college football fan base out there, the college football landscape is looking at this and saying, what do we need to value? What do you guys value? What metrics are you using? That to me is where this whole thing has just been getting so convoluted, because you can make whatever opinions that you find, and then you can justify it with a very specific metric, but we're not all using the same metrics and values. And so I think that's where it just gets so convoluted. And it gets hard for the average college football fan to follow. It gets hard for me to follow, right? And I am kind of with my ear to the ground on this thing throughout the whole fall. So I don't know if that was really the right place for that tangent, but it's something that I wanted to say. But it's just it's confusing the way they do things, because we're not sure what metrics are valued, not just week to week, but from team to team when they're comparing those as well.
100%. And, that could pound the hammer for days about that subject of, it's just, you just don't know what matters with the committee.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say that I dislike with the metric of the record of opponents, do record of opponents of power 4 opponents, because Tennessee's getting killed by the fact that
Kent State is
UTEP's
the worst team in the world.
Yeah, UTEP won 2 games. Kent State hasn't won a game, and her coach might be betting against them, and it's in $24,000 of credit card debt that he's getting sued about. Like, don't get me wrong, Tennessee's schedule is not great. Power 4 schedule is not great either. But when you're talking about record of opponent, it looks a lot better when you take out those two games, when those two teams are combined 2-18. And I think Chat's probably a little bit over 500. So, but that doesn't matter. Like give like Oregon credit for beating Boise State. If you're playing like a legit good Group of 5 team, like yeah, you can give them some credit for winning that game, or that can mean a little bit. But beating a 2-10 UTEP team is no different than beating a 5-5 Akron team, or I don't know what Akron's record is, but just for sake of argument, like to me, that's no different. So
Yeah.
it should be more about
Yeah.
what your record is against, or what the record of your Power 4 opponents is, because that tells you a little bit more about how the teams that could realistically beat you are doing.
Yeah, there's so much inconsistency, and you're right, Rick. Like you can look at how they're valuing, bad losses are hurting Tennessee right now, right, with the Arkansas loss. But then it's like, okay, well, you look at Ole Miss and the non-conference is the same. Tennessee technically has a better win because Alabama's ranked ahead of Georgia. The loss isn't as bad. Arkansas is better than Kentucky. So why is Ole Miss ahead of Tennessee? Well, how are you going to put Tennessee ahead of Ole Miss, but then keep Georgia behind Ole Miss? That means Tennessee's ahead of Georgia. Georgia beat them. So then we have to value head to head. And it's like, but hey, by the way, you have SMU ahead of BYU. Both have one loss. BYU won on the field. So you're not valuing head to head there. Dude, it's so inconsistent. And it's hard. I understand it is a difficult thing to check all boxes and get it perfect. You're going to tick off someone no matter which way you slice it. But it is always very inconsistent. And just even the SMU BYU thing, it's like, how can we take you seriously if you're doing something like that? Or even like ranking, you go down the list ranking Missouri. What are we doing? They didn't even fall. Like, there's so many things that don't make sense. But I want to get back to, I want to get back to some things that Tennessee fans should be rooting for. The Indiana blowout is one. Ryan doesn't sound as optimistic. I think that is the easiest path because I see Ohio State drubbing Indiana by 4 touchdowns more than I see, say, a Notre Dame upset loss. But these things can still happen. And Notre Dame upset loss is atop the list, as well as an Ole Miss upset loss, which seems more likely now after the way Florida performed last week in its win against LSU. Those two things would be the same as Indiana falling out. Ole Miss loses to Florida this weekend. They're gone. And of course, if Notre Dame loses to Army, which I don't think is going to happen, but the road game to SC, rivalry game, it could happen. So Notre Dame at SC, Ole Miss at Florida this weekend. If one of those teams can get upset, I think Tennessee's in.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more optimistic of a Notre Dame upset maybe than you are, just because there's 2 cracks at it. And look, I don't really think Army's going to get them, but Notre Dame hasn't been overly convincing in any of their wins. And look, I know USC struggled. New quarterback in, seemed to play a little bit better last week. In that game, if I'm not mistaken, is at the Coliseum.
Yeah, road game.
Yeah, so
Notre Dame's historically struggled there too.
Yeah, like that's the one that to me is a very clear number 2 besides Ole Miss losing at Florida this week. Like to me, I think that game is by far the next best chance for a team Tennessee needs to stumble. And then the fact that there's just 2 cracks at it. Like again, I don't think USC is going to lose to Army or Notre Dame's going to lose to Army this week, but Army is capable of beating them. To me, more so than like Mississippi State's capable of beating Ole Miss. Egg Bowl madness. You never know, but just because of that, Notre Dame is one that I circle more because I do think they have 2 legit games here to end the season.
And also, I think something that we haven't mentioned yet, and it doesn't need to be mentioned for long, but the elephant in the room is that for any of this to even matter, for it to just be immediately an obsolete conversation, Tennessee's got to go handle business in Nashville next weekend. And I'm not really too concerned about the game here, Saturday in Knoxville. But Ryan, the thing that sparked that in my head just then was you talking about, hey, anything can happen in the Egg Bowl, right? Hey, maybe anything can happen in Nashville. I don't think it's too likely, but it's a Vanderbilt team that absolutely knows that they have a chance at ruining Tennessee's playoff chances at their home field in Nashville. So, again, none of this matters unless Tennessee can go out there and finish off their season 2-0. I think they can. I'm not sitting here saying that they can't or saying that people should be freaking out about the Vanderbilt game. but it's got to matter. Tennessee's got to go out there and handle business first and foremost.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And of course, we'll get into that game next week. And Vandy's
Jack, is
much
is
better.
somebody
Than
Jack, is somebody playing the Georgia fight song back there in the background? I heard some
big, this
noise.
massive truck just driving through my apartment complex. It's gone now. But yeah, so the Vandy games, we'll get into that next week. And obviously, doors are much better than in years past. No easy out. But yes, Rick, Tennessee has to finish strong and probably has to look good against Vandy too. You don't want to win on just a field goal or something.
Couple, two other games that I'm not really sure they end up mattering, but from like an optics standpoint, I think Tennessee should be cheering for is one, Vanderbilt to beat LSU this week. It's kind of a double whammy.
Makes the
A
win
lot of
better.
these SEC teams are really, because for so long, even until last week, LSU looked like a really good win. I think that's already going in the wrong direction. And if LSU loses this week, I don't see how you can really argue that's a good win at all for anybody anymore. I mean, what that would put them at 7-5. They beat Oklahoma in the regular season, and that would put Vanderbilt at 7-4 going into the Tennessee game. So all of a sudden, those games are kind of on level playing fields. And then the other one, which is in 2 weeks, I think maybe the Friday after Thanksgiving. At least traditionally, that's when that game's played. It's Arkansas, Missouri. I think Arkansas plays La Tech this week to get 6 wins. If Arkansas can get to 7-5, to me that loss doesn't look nearly as bad. And if Missouri can get to would fall to 8-4, I think that helps Tennessee too. Here's a take.
Knocks them out of the top 25.
Yeah, here's a take.
Uh-huh.
Tennessee beating Florida at home was a better win than Alabama beating Missouri at home without Brady Cook playing.
I agree.
Like Alabama's
sure.
getting credit for that game for winning a top 25 game, and Brady Cook was out in the second quarter. Now, don't get me wrong, they were going to win even if Brady Cook played the whole game because Missouri's incredibly fraudulent, remarkably fraudulent. But it's like it's a top 25 win for them. It's not even a good win. Like Florida at home is to me a better win for Tennessee than Missouri at home is for Alabama.
I agree.
Florida at home would be an even better win if DJ Lagway had played the whole game. I mean, Florida's been pretty dang good when DJ Lagway's been playing.
I think it takes something to be able to stop them. It's one of those things that were going around on Tuesday night, and this isn't necessarily Tennessee related, but I'm going to try to tie it in. A lot of people took issue with the ESPN graphic, and I want to make sure to say that this wasn't like the selection committee's exact reasoning. It was the ESPN graphic, but they showed the key wins for Texas. They showed Vanderbilt and Arkansas being those key wins. A lot of Tennessee fans, had trouble, with that, kind of spotting the inconsistency, saying that, well, how is Arkansas a key win for Texas, but it's not a key win for Tennessee, but it is a bad loss for Tennessee. It's like Florida has a very comparable schedule or record right now to Arkansas. I believe that they have the exact same record. I'm not going to sit here and make the case that Florida should be projected as a great win for Tennessee or anything. It certainly doesn't beat out Tennessee's win over Alabama. But it's like that's also, if you're saying that Arkansas is a good win for Texas, then Florida should be a good win for Tennessee because they're exactly comparable. They have the exact same record, not only in conference but overall as well. So again, that's not a point to plant your flag on, but it's just kind of pointing out those inconsistencies when you're talking about which teams are propped up and which teams aren't.
Yeah, and last thing here about the rankings, the game that is getting a lot of buzz is Texas A&M, and it means a lot for a lot of people. I've been of the belief the whole time that the best case for Tennessee is just for Texas to beat Texas A&M and make the playoff, right? Clinch a spot in Atlanta. Texas is in no matter what. Don't have to worry about them anymore. They're up there. But it eliminates A&M, so there's no scenario of A&M leaping Tennessee. But there's some people on Twitter have been saying that, hey, Tennessee fans should be rooting for A&M because Tennessee will not only leap Texas but stay ahead of A&M. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think if A&M has a win over a top 5 team, they will leap Tennessee because it's just it's going to be at the time the best win in the SEC. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be, but at the time it would be, right? And I think A&M would leap Tennessee, and while it's possible Tennessee would leap Texas, it doesn't really matter if they're getting leaped by A&M. So we're back to square one anyway. A team is ahead of Tennessee, right? And I don't even know if that's 100% certainty. Like, Texas would have to fall a lot. They'd have to fall almost 10 spots. They should, in my opinion. If Texas loses to A&M, Tennessee should be ranked ahead. But like I said, we're back to square one anyway if A&M leaps Tennessee. So I would just root for Texas eliminating A&M so you don't have to worry about it. But there's another thing about this. If A&M loses to Auburn this weekend, that eliminates them in general.
Yeah.
Right? But then if A&M beats Texas as an unranked team in all likelihood, maybe 24-25. But it's going to be not a good loss for Texas. It's not going to be a top 15 road loss anymore. Maybe that creates a further drop for Texas, and Tennessee can leap them. And I don't think there's any scenario where if A&M loses to Auburn and then beats Texas that the Aggies leap the Vols. So that is an instance where I could see rooting for A&M if they lose to Auburn this weekend, and it's only a 2.5 point spread in the Plains. It's very possible.
And I don't know if you saw, but Mike Elko's
He's looking ahead.
It's all on
incredible.
Texas. That was so funny. I don't know
That
if
was
anybody
incredible.
didn't see it. He was asked about in his press conference this week about like not looking ahead to the Texas game or like the challenge of that, and he gave an answer and he ended it with, "Our entire focus is on Texas." Oh, I mean Auburn.
That was incredible.
Which
So,
if
go ahead, finish that
I
thought.
was gonna say if Hugh Freeze had any Kirby Smart on him, he would have that video cut up right before the Auburn comment and have it playing over and over and over again in the facility all week.
Yeah, I'd put it in the stadium before the game, like Tennessee did with the Alabama radio announcer, right?
Yeah.
Get the fans hyped up and say, hey, fans, they don't care about this game either. So I want to put myself. I'm gonna put a Tennessee cap on real quick, right?
Yeah.
Is there a if I'm really thinking about this from just a diehard Tennessee fan's point of view, is there a worry that Texas or Indiana could one of these situations could play out? And what you're talking about and what we talked about earlier with Indiana losing to Ohio State and the committee just saying, yeah, but we've been so high. And I guess that maybe this is more Texas as I'm thinking this out, but just the committee saying, but we've been so high on them all year that, we're not going to make that big of a drop to drop them down. With them saying, yeah, they lost it, to maybe a ranked Texas A&M, maybe an unranked Texas A&M. And yeah, that's late in the season, but man, we've had them up there for so long. We respect them so much. We think that they've been so consistent, and this one loss doesn't really change that. We just have a hard time dropping them all the way back, down 8 spots, 9 spots, whatever it would be. And Tennessee could get screwed in that kind of situation. I don't know if it's exactly screwed. I'm just kind of using that word as I go.
No,
I would imagine there's a lot of Tennessee fans that have that exact fear that things could still sort of play out in their way. But the committee would say, but we don't really feel like they should be dropping 9 spots for that situation. So I think that's another wrinkle to kind of think about here.
Yeah, it's possible. And that's what I said.
Am I right? Is that a fair thought?
It's possible because that's kind of what I was saying about, if A&M takes care of business this week and then wins next week. I don't know. I don't think it's a certainty that Tennessee leaps A&M or Texas, like you're saying. That would be a far drop. But I think it's more likely if A&M loses to Auburn and beats Texas because it's the worst loss. I will say this before you get to your point, Ryan. Georgia, when they lost to Ole Miss, they dropped 9 spots, 3-12. And then BYU dropped 8 spots this past week. I know it's Big 12 lost to 3-6 Kansas, but still they went from 6 to 14. So there has been some substantial drops. I point to the Georgia one more than any, to where the committee will, drop you pretty far. 3-12 to the first team looking out for Georgia. That was a pretty big drop at the time.
Yeah, no, that definitely was. I think, the thing I was just going to say, and this is just the Big Ten talking point all week of let the games matter, or like let the games matter. Games matter.
All right, Danny Cannell.
Yeah, it's why isn't Army ranked in the top 5 games matter?
Yeah,
there's a little nuance to the situation. Let's use our brains and look at the nuance in the situation instead of just say games matter. And if games matter, why is Army not ranked in the top 5? They're undefeated. Why is even games matter makes no sense for Texas ranking in the top 5 because they have a loss.
Yeah.
So, it's been quite the battle. I feel like this week's really when it picked up, which is funny because Indiana can make everybody look really dumb by just winning on Saturday. Everybody's already talking about them as if that game's over, but that talking point is just so brain dead that And everybody's like, it's Big Two conference for Indiana. I've seen that take multiple times too. Well, this conference expansion stuff's gotten so out of control. You don't even play half the teams in your conference anymore. So you have to actually look at who you're playing in conference.
Yeah.
You can't just say Big Two conference. You
Right.
play in the Big Ten. You play what? Half of the teams in the conference, and the SEC
Yeah,
you
because
play
there's 18.
Yeah, and in the SEC you play just under or just over half the teams in the conference. So it's a lot more nuanced debate than people who want to just make it simple, round square hole type situation.
I need a GIF of Ryan just going, "Come on, let's use our brains." So I'm going to use that in 1,000 different situations with just idiotic takes and just stupid people. I just need that clip of use your brains. That was excellent.
That is good.
If somebody could clip that out for me.
Yeah, it'll all work itself out, hopefully. But there's so many avenues you can root for. But I think as we've laid out, Ole Miss and Notre Dame upset losses, or an absolute drubbing this weekend in the shoe, help out Tennessee, and then the whole Texas A&M thing. I think if A&M loses to Auburn this weekend, root for the Aggies. If they beat Auburn, just root for the Longhorns and just get rid of that entire thing in itself.
I will say these final 2 weeks are going to be must-see television. Not just because it's college football and we love college football and it's a great game, but because there is so much on the line with different games. These last 2 weeks are going to be exhilarating. They're going to be confusing. They're going to be frustrating. But it's going to be it's going to be what I think is going to be a great 2 weeks for college football. Now we'll see what happens after that, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on the product.
Well, in what some are calling the game of the year, University of Texas El Paso is coming to Knoxville. It's Tennessee UTEP this week in Neyland Stadium. Not a night game. How great for you guys.
Yeah,
rejoice.
No kidding.
Especially considering the basketball game the day before is going to be a night game for us at probably 9:30. So thank goodness we don't have 3 in a row when it comes to Saturday night.
That is nice.
Yeah, it's as a big basketball guy here, it's brutal that Tennessee is going to play perhaps either 1A or 1B, its biggest non-conference game in a season at as Rick said, probably 9:30 p.m. Eastern time on a Friday night on CBS Sports Network with a football game at 1 p.m. the next day. Nobody's going to care.
That is tough.
Nobody.
That is tough.
And this is the second back-to-back weekend where it's just been obviously we've talked about it being crossover season for a while now, but even going back to last weekend, it was the night game at Georgia, and then straight into like a 2:00 p.m. tip-off here in Knoxville. Ryan bravely made the trip back. I did not.
The Gubs.
But man,
big
it's
game.
Just, it don't stop. It don't stop these days.
It does not stop. So, we didn't get into the Georgia game. Don't need to. I thought Tennessee, looked competitive. Thought Nico fought really well. There was obviously mistakes that were made and, coverage issues with the linebackers and safeties that led to Georgia having a good day offensively. Scored 30. Not first team to not only score 20 but 30 on Tennessee. So, when you look at this UTEP game, Tennessee's going to win by a lot. There's no question. 41.5 point spread, Ryan. But what are you looking for out of Tennessee in this game? Like the number one thing you're looking for?
I think it's just to be, generally speaking, to be sharp, the passing game to be sharp. Like nothing that Tennessee can do well in this game is going to be like some major revelation or an incredibly good sign or it's like, oh, wow, they figured it out. But I think it's just that you want the passing offense to look as good as it can and to look like it did, especially against Chattanooga. Against Kent State, I really don't even think the passing offense was that great. But to be crisp, Nico to be on time, protection to be good, receivers to make catches when the ball's there. I think that would probably be my number one thing.
Who would have thought, Rick, that first half against Chat was the best Tennessee's passing offense would have looked all year?
Yeah, no kidding. And then who would have thought that maybe the second best time against Mississippi State is when Tennessee's quarterback gets injured before halftime even comes up? Because they were moving the ball really well in that game, too. I think Nico had 174 in that first half, and I don't think he was going to get pulled out. So I'd imagine he would have gone over 300 in that game.
He had 2 long passes. First meaningful game all year.
And
yeah.
Score in the first half.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm looking for execution out of this Tennessee football team. I go back to what Brew McCoy said on Tuesday, and he said, look, we understand the position we're in for the playoffs, and all we can go out there and do is go out there and absolutely beat down these teams. That was not the words he used. Those are the words I'm using, but it's basically what he said. He said, we need to go and win these games. We need to make a statement in the process. Now, do I think the selection committee is going to look in detail at what Tennessee does to UTEP? No, I do not.
Yeah.
But I do think that everything that happens here on Saturday sets up next Saturday. Next Saturday, at this point, is the biggest game on Tennessee's schedule because it's the only one that matters if they can give themselves a chance to be in the playoffs or not. So I'm looking for just sharp execution. I would like to see if Tennessee can dominate this UTEP team, which I think they can. Again, I think you want to do everything you can to put yourself in the best position for next week in the capital of the state of Tennessee. You know, again, the committee's not going to say, wow, Tennessee beat UTEP by 45 points. What a great game for the offense. What a bounce back for the offense. They're not going to be doing that. But if you can string together two really statement, just definitive wins here in these final 2 weeks, again, you need a little bit of help from teams above you. But I think that helps Tennessee's case as well. So I'm just looking for execution.
Football guy Rick, all about execution and ruthless aggression. John Cena throwback. Yeah,
good.
no, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. You know, passing offense, just finding better rhythm. How about just the pass? You know, pass rush was pretty ineffective last week. How about just dominating in this game? You know, just having some confidence going into Vandy because it was pretty non-existent last week. And you know, we talked about on the pod, if Carson Beck has time, he'll carve you up, and that's what he did often because he had time. But yeah, this is a meaningless game. You know, when you look at it from a broad view, of course, Tennessee's going to have to perform well, and you don't want to be lackadaisical in any game like an Austin P was last year. You remember that game, the 38-13, just ugly sight of a game that was. You don't want that to happen here. You want to show the committee you can pound a bad opponent. And Ryan, I'll ask you first, just no score prediction necessary yet, but like, do you think Tennessee covers? Where are you at right now?
Yeah, I lean toward Tennessee covering against terrible teams in non-conference play is like usually a pretty safe bet. Definitely Tennessee first half cover. So yeah, I think Tennessee does. I don't think it matters, but I wonder if Josh Heupel, tries to run it up for style points a little bit, given where things are at with the committee. I don't think that would actually. Go ahead.
It feels like he's done that against really bad teams before. Like, it feels like when Tennessee has a huge spread, they just absolutely boat race people.
Guys, he kicked an onside kick in the first half against a non-conference team this year. Like, of course he'll run it up, I think.
Yes, but at the same time, I've never seen Josh Heupel take his foot off the gas like he did in the second half of that Kent State game. He wanted to play with a running clock. Not even just gassed and more. They huddled every single play. I think Tennessee's offense had 3 drives the entire second half. They had 3 drives the first 6 minutes of the game. And then the final 30 minutes, they had 3. They huddled before every play. They ran it almost every play. They were just trying their hardest to get that game over with. But you're right. I mean, he did kick an onside kick up, whatever it was, 30-0 or whatever. Again, I don't really think I just think it's more that these teams aren't equipped to handle Tennessee's offense, especially if it plays fast. And again, I don't think it's going to matter at all, but I could see him doing it anyway. Because it could matter a little bit with as dumb as the committee is. It could matter a little bit if Tennessee were to score like 45 against Vanderbilt last week, and it's like, well, they scored 70 and 45 in the last 2 weeks. The offense is finally clicking. Like,
yeah,
the 70 part of that would be a joke, but again, it's just like the committee's so dumb. You could probably trick him with that, honestly.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. I kind of forgot what I was going to say there, but I think you make a good point.
Where are you at with this game, Rick?
What did you say the spread was? Around 40 something?
Yeah, 6 touchdowns.
I see Tennessee's defense really bouncing back and playing angry, playing with something to prove, playing to especially keep an opposing team out of the end zone. So I think that if Tennessee's offense can just get up there, they can score 4, 5, 6, touchdowns, whatever it might be, to get them above 40. I think that the UTEP offense is. I think that the Tennessee defense is really going to be able to make their mark on this game. So I see Tennessee in a blowout. But yeah.
Yep.
Hey, what was the was it Ty Simpson's dad? Which team was that Heupel did run up the score on?
Yeah.
UT
When
Martin.
was
UT
that
Martin.
22? Was that it certainly wasn't last
22.
year,
22.
right?
62,
Okay.
62, 14, something like that.
Yeah.
And it appears Ty Simpson's little brother is a stud quarterback too. So that one might go
Actual
back
stud or
to,
Ty Simpson stud?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's good, Jack. It's good. That one, yeah, you're
Um,
right. That might not be a favorable recruitment. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know anything, but
Yeah.
that's funny to think
Yeah, I don't
about.
either, but just the speculation of that. I think he's
Yeah,
a freshman, and he's been putting up insane numbers this year.
is he playing in? Is he Martin?
Yeah,
Westview?
what to say? I think so. The same high school that Ty went to, which I'm
Westview.
blanking on.
Yeah.
Westview. Yeah, I
Yeah, in
think
Martin,
that's the
Tennessee.
case. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, the dad's still at UT Martin, so I assume
Yeah.
it's some school out there at the very least.
Yeah, I assume it's Westview. It's 2A, so a little bit.
Great competition.
Yeah. Same competition Arch Manning played against.
That's right. Yeah, same competition Brock Vandergrift played against. So
Sometimes it works out differently for those guys, but
yeah, makes it harder to scout. Is what I would say.
yeah.
Doesn't mean that people aren't good at that classification, but maybe a little bit easier to trick people. No, hey, Harrison Bailey played in the highest classification, one of the best
right.
leagues in all of America.
Was it
And he was terrible.
Marietta, right?
Marietta, yeah. Granted, he had a couple
that's
5
funny.
stars he was throwing the ball to that made him look really good, but
HB5.
HB 15.
He was
Right?
15 at Tennessee,
Yeah,
but I think
yeah.
he was 5 in high school.
He's 5 in Marietta. Okay.
Okay, so just very small backstory. When I got my start in Tennessee media as a sophomore in college, I started working with Matt Ray and Dale Dowden, who are great guys. Matt Ray now for VolQuest, Dale Dowden for Vol Report Rivals. But we work for the site, the Sports Illustrated Tennessee site, and those guys are just massively into recruiting, right? And they would always refer to him as HB5 because they covered like all of his high school games in Georgia because they knew he was a Tennessee recruit, all this stuff. So they just always referred to him as HB5. So that's how I know that.
That's good.
And they were big Harrison Bailey guys. Didn't quite pan out, but the fans were too. Everybody
Who was the quarterback from Texas that Tennessee got?
Caden Salter.
Yeah,
That's who it
Liberty
was.
guy.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I remember my dad telling me all the time that he was out scouting Caden Salter for Tennessee. He would go to the camps by himself. I was like, "God, you're a legend over there." He would go to these camps to watch Caden Salter and be able to pass along any information on Twitter.
All right, last thing here on the podcast, we're going to get into a little hoops. Kick it over to these guys to primarily talk about it. But Tennessee against Virginia tonight, the Who's, as our good friend Ryan Sylvia wants us to refer to them as, down in the Bahamas. Another noteworthy non-conference game. Of course, Tennessee played Louisville a couple weeks ago, one big up north. But what are you guys looking for in tonight's matchup and just your assessment of Tennessee so far, 4-0 on the season?
Well, let's start on the injury side of things. As I've been multitasking the first half of this podcast, some news broke that Cam Carson had missed 4 to 6 weeks with a left hand injury that he suffered in the second half of Tennessee's win against Austin Peay the other day. So injury bug continues to be a problem for Tennessee. I mean, there were points at practice on Tuesday that was open to the media where Tennessee had 8 scholarship players practicing. So they very, very banged up. JP Estrella remains questionable for this game day to day with the left foot injury, same left foot injury that plagued him throughout really most of the offseason since the summer and into preseason practice. The good news, and this I think becomes particularly important with Cam Carr out, is that Darlington Dubar appears to be nearing a return. No official word for Tennessee that he's going to play or anything like that. But so this last week, he returned to practice. He mostly just did individual work, working off to the side, conditioning type stuff, but was dressed out for the games, didn't play. Tuesday's practice, he was a full participant, did everything. So no word from Tennessee on whether he's expected to play this weekend in the Bahamas, but I do expect him to play and should be in line to get some opportunities with both Cam Carr out and then also Cade Phillips potentially having to play some 5 spot with Estrella maybe being out. So injury bug is a problem for Tennessee right now, but it's been a good start to the season for Tennessee for sure. 4-0. They're playing well, and the Virginia game, one, you expect them to take care of business in. I don't think this is going to be a very good Virginia team, as you'd expect when the coach quits 2 weeks before the start of the season. Probably don't have the best team in the world, but still a Power 5 test, a Virginia team that will still play that pack line defense, slow style of play, which leads to less possessions, which leads to a little bit less room for error in a game like this. It's not going to be 160 type, possession game or anything like that. So, and then the second game be a huge test, whether it's Baylor or St. John's. No matter who Tennessee plays, will be one of its hardest games on the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, man. Friday night, sit back, grab a pizza, grab a drink if you need to. That's going to be an exciting game to watch on national television. Ryan, Jack and I, we love our European basketball players. Yeah, we love one specific European basketball player, number 77. I love the way that Igor Milicic Jr. is playing lately. These last couple of games, he's really gone off. And Ryan, you and I watch him in practice. You've seen a little bit more than me, but he's a guy that Rick Barnes gets on, right? He's a guy that is taking a lot of instruction. He's taking a lot of criticism even at times, but I love the way that he's being aggressive out there on the court. I love the way that he sort of found a little bit more of his stride these last couple of games, and I love the versatility that it brings to the table. So when I was watching that game on Sunday, I just kept thinking of and man, it's my favorite trend in sports right now. But I love the John Gruden videos. Right, Igor Milicic would do something. I go, got me feeling nicey. Right, that's kind of my vibe towards Igor Milicic. Woo! Right, and I love the way he's playing right now. So it's just one guy to kind of spotlight, saying I like the way that he's being aggressive. But you can tell me more of what it is. I mean, I think he unlocks a lot for that offense and gives them a lot more versatility, a lot more spacing on the court, just can do some different things that maybe other players can't.
100%. It's not that he was bad the first week of the season, but just a little bit more quiet, and he really came
more
out
hesitant to me.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a coming out party last week. What he did against Austin Peay, I don't think you're going to see that at that rate where he shot 1-3 and scored 23 points because of Austin Peay's kind of gambling, aggressive defense that led to him getting a lot of looks at the rim in favorable spots. But that's what he does. He's a really good shooter. What he uses really well once he hits a shot or two, his pump fake is really good. And then he's a good athlete for 6'10", and then he gets to the basket, and at 6'10" with long arms, like it just gives you a lot of angles that you can finish at, and he's been a good finisher at the basket. So what he's shown is a lot of what I saw during the offseason and why I was, really bullish on him, or even more bullish on him than Chaz Lanier, just because I thought he could do a little bit more. And it's not that he's going to score in a lot of isolation situations. Like, you're not just going to give him the ball in ISO and he's going to be athletic enough to get to the basket. But when the defense gets moving and when people have to close out on him, he's athletic enough to get to the rim then and score. And I think I said it on our preview podcast before the season, Rick, like Tennessee's 2-point offense was one of the big questions I had. Igor is a guy that can help fix or help answer a lot of that, be good there. He's been good there to this point in the season. I think he can continue to do so. And, to your point about Luka, number 77, you know what number Igor Milicic is, right?
7?
Number 7.
777.
Somebody told me the other day, and they said that
better
than
they 666.
Yeah,
no kidding. There, we don't want the mark of the beast.
Hot take.
We want the mark of the basketball beast, not just the mark of the beast. They said that he's got some Luka to his game, and I see that a little bit. But it's not just Luka; it's more of that European style, just kind of free moving around the court, can do different things. But I would say if that's a guy that he's trying to kind of model some of his game after, you see that it works. So he's got to continue to be effective with it, got to continue to be smart about what he's doing. But I really like the way that he's kind of coming to form. You can see him gaining a little bit more confidence each game. So excited to see what he does in the Bahamas this weekend, because I think a lot of eyes are now kind of tuning into him.
Yeah, I think 100%. And with Chaz Lanier, he had his worst game of the season against Austin Peay. He was limited in practice the other day with a migraine headache. I'm sure he'll play on Thursday night, but it'll be curious to see how we can bounce back. A little bit of adversity this week. See how he does, and then I just think the rotations with Dubar potentially in the fold. Who gets a lot of backup 4 spot if Phillips has to play a lot of backup 5 spot if Estrella doesn't play. All that, I'm just going to be curious to see what that looks like and what minutes look like for a really thin Tennessee basketball team right now.
No doubt.
Well, there you have it. Vols and Who's tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then, of course, the big one tomorrow night, as Ryan mentioned on CBS Sports Network. Is that what you said? It'll be a late one.
CBS Sports
So
Network. Yep.
stay up
Get
and
your
watch
nap
it.
in.
Follow along with all of Rock Top Insider's coverage. You can follow Ryan at RChump00. That's SCHUMP. Follow Rick at Rick Butler. You can follow me at Jack Foster Media. And, of course, follow Rocky Top Insider at Rocky Top Insider on all social. Also, I'm on Blue Sky now, too. Cool app you should check out. Same handle. And
RTI
then, of
will be
course,
there soon, by the way.
there we go. All right. Yep. Another
It's on my list.
nothing like another social
My long
platform to make
list.
an account for and, post stuff too. But
Yeah,
I actually
go
think,
follow us on Threads while you're at it.
Yeah.
We're busy over there.
Are we
I
on
will
Threads?
I think
We technically we aren't, but technically we are.
I will
I don't
say
have it downloaded.
it feels like Blue Sky is more sustainable and much more legit this time around. Of course, Jack Dorsey, who invented Twitter, is behind Blue Sky, so it has that backing. It feels a little more legit in my opinion.
Oh,
It's
that guy.
basically the exact
Okay.
same as Twitter, like the interface, everything. It's very similar. So cool. It's a cool experience.
Nobody go out there and claim the Rocky Top Insider handle before we can get over to it. By the way,
Yeah, please don't do
that
that.
would just be cruel and unusual.
Be kind of funny.
No,
I'd respect whoever did
no,
it.
no.
Don't do it.
Would be
But if you
Rocky
do it,
underscore top
respect.
underscore insider
Respect.
underscore triple underscore.
I will say, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna make my handle Jack Foster since I'm joining this like in the infancy. I'm like, that was already taken. Like, you gotta be kidding me! How many people are named Jack Foster? You like what? I literally did it this third day. It was even an app. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I just went with what I have. But to close this out, can also follow all of Tennessee coverage on RockTopInsider.com. We got football, we got basketball, we got everything you could possibly need on RockTopInsider.com. Before Ryan and Rick, I'm Jack. We'll see you next week.